Good evening, everyone. I guess we'll go ahead and get the meeting started. So I want to thank everybody for making it out on such a cold, frosty evening. So thanks for coming out to join us. I guess we'll get started with a prayer, and then we'll start with going with the pledge. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here this evening, that we may gather together to work together to fulfill your plan for our lives and government, and that we may be your useful instruments in this world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so get started. First person we have up to speak this evening is Roy Whiteley. And Roy is the founder of Marylanders for Fair Property Taxation. And what they're about is they want to bring out about fair property taxation through the assessment process reform, reduction of tax and cap rates, taxpayer education, and legislative action. Roy's been kind of leading the fight on this for a long time. Was really instrumental in helping get some property taxes reduced in Harford County a few years ago. So without any further ado, I'll give you Roy White. Come on up, Roy.
Good evening, folks. I'd like to talk to you about an outfit called SDAT, the Department of Assessments and Taxation. Unavoidable property taxes are a thorn in everybody's side, but they generally produce about 50% of our governmental budget revenues. The big question we always ask is, do they need to be so unequal and so unfair? For the past 50 years, my family and I have been appealing our assessments, which is the basis for all of our property taxes. We have found that the entire assessment and appeal system to be archaic, biased, corrupt, cumbersome, inaccurate, incomprehensible, inequitable, non-uniform, out of date, subjective, unequal, unfair, and even vindictive. It's quite a list of flaws, but let's examine the system and see if you might agree with us. Property taxpayers are at the mercy of understaffed tax assessors using outdated equipment. They're still on Windows 2000, believe it or not. Outdated technology and information to set the value of our property, from which they then set our property tax cap, rates, and taxes. The system is fraught with problems. Start with the assessors. These civil servants originally could enter the field with nothing but a high school or a GED education. Many of those career employees are still working today, setting our assessments. They were not required to have any specific real estate appraisal training to be hired. They basically learn on the job. Continuing education is not required to stay on the job or to improve their capabilities. Based on this education or this on-the-job training, they then testify against us and tell us of the vast years of experience that they think they have, when they really only have 1 year's experience many times over, because they're doing the same repetitive projects over and over, making the same errors and mistakes. Less than 25% of their supervisors have or are required to have education or training which even remotely approaches that of a licensed real estate appraiser that the state imposes on their licensing restrictions. Now, to effectively combat the state's ludicrous assessments, we always recommend that if you've got a severe case of poor assessment, that you consider hiring a licensed appraiser. The expense is usually a good return on the investment. Now, here are a few facts about the current property assessment system. The system, which was established in 1977, is based on construction costs. But the only way you can fight it is use fair market sales values, not an equal condition. The assessor staff has been reduced from about 280 to less than 150, with very few of their vacancies being filled. This depleted assessor staff is unable to make the mandated physical inspections or update the market values or indices that are used to keep these assessments supposedly in line with current conditions. Thus, a very large percentage, reportedly between 33 and 50% of all assessments are incorrect due to this lack of information. The new format they just came out with on their worksheets just defies transparency. We recently had a session with our assessor, presented 26 questions, of which 22 of them could not be answered by her or her supervisor. They actually couldn't find the data in their own system or in their own records. A recent state legislative audit shows that 16,950 out of 60,200 Montgomery County assessments have discrepancies ranging from 20 to 43%. That's worth $286 million with that kind of error. But these errors all exist without any explanation or documentation. That's 28% of that county's triennial assessments. Now, projecting that ratio over the entire 666,000 triennial assessments that take place every year, that's about 186,500 assessments that could be wrong. An independent Rockville firm over there analyzed all 2012 assessments for homes in Anne Arundel, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Howard, Montgomery, and Prince George's counties, finding absolutely tens of thousands of assessments, as they quoted it, wildly out of line with their recent sales prices by as much as 20% above or below sales. The triennial assessments ensure that at least 2/3 of our 2 million taxpayer assessments are always at least 2 years out of date. Millions of potential assessable tax-based dollars are lost or unaccounted for because of these conditions. If these missed base dollars were recorded, our tax rates could be drastically reduced for all uniformly assessed properties while still obtaining all of the revenues that we need to operate our government. Property assessment worksheets, which is only available to you and I if we file an appeal, are unavailable to taxpayers online, but ASDAC promotes a private firm called SpecPrint, who purchased our 2 million worksheet records and resells them for $115 to $225 per county. Our internet access to worksheets bill, which unfortunately just got pulled today, so it won't be in the system this year, that would have given us, if it passed, access to those worksheets for comparative purposes. Right now, about 30,000 appeals are filed each year. And that number is very, very low compared to what it had been, primarily due to the complexity of the system. Now, sadly, the average taxpayer really doesn't understand the system, and most don't give a damn. You ask the average taxpayer after 700,000 of us get that December the 31st notice, and you're likely to hear from them, I like it. Look what I'm worth. And you say to them, well, could you sell it for that? No, but look what I'm worth. And then you say, well, what happens in July when that notice becomes a tax bill that you got to pay in September? You say, I don't care. It's in my mortgage. And therein lies the problem. It's hidden in the mortgage. They have no idea of what they're actually paying in taxes. Now, here's a few examples of unfair and unequal assessments that we've gathered from various media and report articles. We've got identical side-by-side cookie-cutter houses of the same builder in Towson. Tax bill, $1,968. The guy next door, $3,038. Identical houses. Now, writer Tom Hansley, you've heard of him. He purchased and combined 2 condos down in Baltimore, paid $12.5 million for them. His assessment, $2.2 million. Wouldn't you and I like to get a break like that? That same building's got 90 condominiums in it. And at our last check, those assessments for that building were $368 million less than the sales, and only half the units were sold. The Harbor East Marriott, it's valued at $155 million. It's taxed at $1 for the next 25 years. Baltimore Lockwood Place, valued at $58 million. Gets a $1.5 million tax break until 2024. Excuse me. The Zenith Luxury Apartments, valued at $40 million, only pays 15% of its property taxes for the next 15 years. Now, millions of us get the homestead tax credit. And you might have read Frank Conway, the former clerk of court. He was a fairly large property owner. Every one of his units had a homestead credit attached to it, which is illegal. You're only allowed to have it for the house that you live in. He pleaded ignorance of the law, and they let him go. All Sassafras River property from Georgetown to below Rock Hall is assessed at $50 a square foot. That's over $2 million an acre. There isn't one property that has ever sold in that county for that kind of price. Now, during the last 3 years, 29,500 accounts valued at $15.9 billion, with a B, dollars were not incorporated on the assessment rolls due to staff shortages. I think what $15.9 billion would do to the overall base, what it could do to lowering the overall tax rate. Tax exemption reviews totaling $6.5 billion, again with a B, only removed 126 million exemptions, $126 million of exemptions. Now, I don't understand the exemption system too clearly. I just cannot fathom why a hospital or a church that owns a profit-making parking lot or a big mall should be exempt from paying taxes on that property. But it happens. Now, the average assessor caseload is over 18,600 cases per year, but only 82% of them are being reviewed. A quick question, how many of you have ever filed for an appeal? Very small, usually. That's what we see, because most people think you can't beat City Hall, so they don't try it. But if you do see that your assessment has issues, you should file an appeal, but you gotta be prepared. The tax appeal process is very simple, but it's a trying situation. It's purposely designed that way to discourage us taxpayers from appealing assessments, even when as many as 50% of them are in error. Also, unlike any other part of our judicial system, we are guilty until proven innocent. You have to go in and actually prove the state to be wrong. They don't even have to testify against you. They can just come in and say, we've presented our case, it's on paper, this is what this person is appealing. But normally they will put up a little bit of a fight. And it's good for you as the taxpayer to record the hearing. Now, until a couple of years ago, you couldn't do that, but we were successful in getting them to bow to that. It has no legal value to you, but it is a good learning tool because you can't write as fast as they talk, and you miss some of the points that you can pick up later if you're listening to a tape. Now, as you go through this three-step process, that is the assessor hearing, the PTAB board, and then the tax court, you've got to be prepared. You have to have your worksheet in hand and challenge any questionable figures with concrete facts, not emotions. And you got to be very prepared to have good sales data. Sales are the most important comparable argument you can make, and it is the only one you can use in the tax court. Now, the state will generally try to blind you with a little footwork at the initial assessor's hearing. They'll provide you what they call a generic listing of area sales. This consists of a list of about 30 items on a page, and they'll range from a mobile home to a McMansion. It's the same way that their computerized mass appraisal system lumps everything together to come up with your value to begin with. You can fight back with truly comparable sales of houses, just like yours, that show sales less than your assessed value. And we found some of these assessors can be quite arrogant, very biased, inaccurate, sometimes rude, but they can sometimes be convinced to change assessments. If you have convincing evidence and arguments, you can be granted a token adjustment within the purview of the assessor. Unofficially, we've been told that they can only give you as much as 15%. I've seen figures slightly higher at times. They act as both judge and jury. They won't tell you this, but you can request a peer review by another assessor in the same area. And as we read the regulations, this could even be in another jurisdiction, and this has been allowed by a former administrator, but right now SDAT, the PTAB administrator, and the Attorney General has knocked us down and said, no, you can't do that. Well, if you're still not satisfied, the next step is the Property Tax Assessment Appeals Board. Now, this is a three-person, politically aligned, governor-appointed board that is supposed to operate as taxpayer advocates. Some actually do. Again, you've got to be totally prepared with facts, not emotions. Good gains in the value adjustments can be obtained using the right information. The assessors and the board staff, unfortunately, occupy the same office space and use the same staff. This closeness then raises the question of whether or not there's an interest conflict. And the administrative offices of the appeals boards is way off in Hagerstown, with only a telephone number and an internet address given. And like all government and businesses, they assume everyone has both a computer and internet service. The final step in the tax assessment process is the tax court. Now, this sounds ominous, but it's really a very informal hearing with a judge, you, and the assessment team. sitting around a table. The judge records the hearing. A disc copy can be obtained for $10, and it can be used for both educational reference and actually for a further legal appeal to the circuit court. The SDAT people will normally bring in reinforcements to bolster a weak case that they might have. But the good judges we've been before are quite knowledgeable, and we've even witnessed them being very helpful to individuals with little experience in carrying their arguments to this level. Conversely, we've seen the deck stacked before the case begins. We recently experienced a state weak case. It was possibly precedent setting, and therefore all stops were pulled out to make sure that the state's ruling was upheld. One could easily assume it was a fixed situation after we witnessed our tax assessor, his supervisor, the state assessor's supervisor, the state's assistant attorney general, and the judge all coming out of the judge's chambers, ushering us over to the hearing room, and we were slammed. Okay, what can happen? A December 2013 Legislative Services audit listed 11 SDAT areas in need of correction. Several of them are repeats from previous years. These included no record of or performance of the physical inspections, no verification of information for tax credit applications, no formal process for reviewing local assessment office performance. Our experience in this is that each office runs its own ship. There are no written rules on how these things are to be performed. There's no supervisory review of assessors' computation. Just imagine, every one of these assessors is a loose cannon out there with nobody checking what the hell they're doing. There are no written policies defining responsibilities of office supervisors, and where spot checks were performed on various assessment system reports, no documentation has been found. Not a very good way to be running a $750 billion business. The nationally recognized Council on State Taxation rates Maryland's system with a C+. That's barely passing. There apparently is no taxpayer involvement in any system review, and the legislature is ill-equipped or even prone to spend the time and effort to provide such a check or require any corrective action. With assessments constantly increasing, but property values decreasing without tax rates proportionally being reduced to adhere to the constant yield theory, the taxpayer is left without recourse. We find our senior citizens on fixed incomes are sometimes being forced to sell long-held family homesteads because of their inability to meet tax obligations. Now for the past 12 years, we've advocated that at least one major thing be done to correct this obviously flawed system. Our very supportive Hartford delegation, which has usually been led by Senator Barry Glassman, has repeatedly introduced our bill that would create a task force to study the whole assessment and appeals system. SDAT, with their highly paid lobbyists, has vigorously fought us, and they've won. They paid this guy $35,000 for 3 months' work. This year, unbelievably, there was a SDAT task force bill buried in the budget bill. Unfortunately, its charge was very limited, and therefore a complete and comprehensive study was not done. They just completed their study in December, issued a 65-page report. But listen to this. The committee was chaired by the SDAT director, staffed by 7 SDAT employees, and 1 SDAT consultant, 8 local financial officers, and 5 Baltimore City government employees. Supposedly, 3 public participants are named, but none of them are listed in the over 300 names that we've put together over the years we've been doing this, that you would find in any of the media outlets, Sun papers, Montgomery County papers, whatnot. Such a sterling committee just hardly instills any confidence in its findings or implementation of its recommendations. Our delegate, Kathy Shalega, just furnished us with a copy of that report, and we're analyzing it, and we'll give her a report shortly. Surprisingly, the limited charges address some of the issues we repeatedly testify about, and the recommendations actually echo our words. Unfortunately, the limited study begins with the unwritten premise that the current assessment system remains unchanged. So no other methodologies were considered. It's hardly a good business approach to studying and solving a problem when you only look at part of the problem. The democratically controlled SDAT solution appears to be throw more money and more people into this morass, and it will get fixed. We think this fox in the henhouse study will end up accomplishing little or nothing. One of our suggested assessment methodologies is addressed in our 40-page report, showing the possibility of billions, again with a B, of assessable base dollars being missed and mismanaged, causing this complete failure of a system reported to have this 33 to 50% error rate. It's been furnished to both the past and the present governor and every member of the General Assembly. Our suggested automated index assessment system is based solely on fair market sales values. It's coupled with the nationally recognized Standard & Poor Case-Shiller Home Price Index, and it's summarily dismissed in this report in one single paragraph without any mention of our involvement or any description of the actual system that we propose. Now, index values by Case-Shiller already exist on a daily basis, just the same as the stock market. And they're geographically attuned to the state in statistical areas as small as a zip code area. So you could pinpoint everybody's value, upgraded on a frequent basis down to the zip code. We feel that such a simple automated system based on actual sales made at this fair market value or an agreed upon pre-bubble year of value kept current with a computerized sales index would actually eliminate questioning the assessed value. For who in his right mind is going to question the sales price that they paid for under fair market conditions? An obvious decrease in appeals at all 3 appeals levels would be an added bonus. We think it deserves a study and a pilot trial. There's nothing to fear for such a trial. It's a win-win situation with nothing to lose other than a little time to look at an overwhelming system that is abhorred by taxpayers and obviously costing everyone, state, county, and city, and all taxpayers, untold millions of dollars. Unfortunately, we learned today that the 2 bills that we normally have put in were pulled by Senator Jennings because of various problems. So we've got nothing going for us this year. We'll give it hell next year. We ask for your help. We ask you to take a look at our website. And remember, nothing happens unless we make it happen. So please join us and make something happen. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I recently got my assessment in the mail, and I've never appealed one before. And I noticed it said you had three options. One, you could do it on the telephone. One, you could do it by writing on a letter. afraid to actually call and ask for a personal meeting. Is there a strategic preference there to those three?
I personally like to confront them. It's too easy for them to take a letter and say no. It's too easy to say no when they're talking to you over the phone because they don't have to confront you. Make them toe the mark. Make them produce the information. They'll stonewall you, believe me, they will stonewall you, but try to pin them down. Your best bet is to get what information you can by conducting a fishing expedition with them, then take that to the PTAB board. We have found that most of those folks, even though they're not really well-trained and educated into the whole process, they are sympathetic to the taxpayer. So you do usually get something out of them. Of course, the best source is the tax court, because you've got a knowledgeable judge up there, and if he is on his game, he's going to be fair with you. He's even going to help you out, and you'll get your best results there.
When you go in, is it just one person you sit down with, or is it like a group?
At the assessor level, generally it's just one person. We happen to have a target about that big on our back, so we normally get the assessor, his supervisor, and somebody from Baltimore sitting in on our meeting. You normally will only get the assessor.
Do they make a decision? I mean, if you ask them to reduce it, will they make a decision right then and there, or is it?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
If you go in and have a one-on-one with them, will they make a decision right then and there, like to reduce? Let's say you're asking to reduce.
Normally no, because they want to go back and talk with the supervisor and find wiggle room and see what they can do to keep giving you any type of a relief. Their whole charge is to keep assessments as high as they possibly can in order to make the whole tax system viable.
If you sit down with a one-on-one, go in personally, is that the person that actually put that number on the document, and are they the ones that actually came up with it?
Generally, but not always. I usually make the request ahead of time that I want the assessor that made the decision to be present. I also notify them that I'm going to record, because if you tell them you're going to record, they will normally record also. And it's a good practice to record. It's a good learning tool. Has no legal value, but it's a good learning tool.
Mr. Whiteley, first of all, I want to thank you for the kind of work you've done. You've gone up against the Leviathan, and you've been doing it for years. So you're the kind of grassroots activist that we all aspire to be. Why did J.B. Jennings pull those bills? Why did J.B. Jennings pull those bills?
The task force bill, obviously, because this other one had just been completed, even though it's not complete. He said there's no way in hell that the General Assembly is going to put in another task force bill. The access to worksheets bill was unfortunately drafted in a fashion that repeated a lot of the information that we actually accomplished last year. And when I talked with Senator Jennings, I suggested that SDAT was purposely holding back and going to throw it back in his face at the last minute. So at 4 o'clock today, we said, if you can't amend it to take care of everything that we would like to see, then I suggest we pull it and let's get it held next year. So he decided to pull it.
Who drafted the bill?
Well, I drafted a copy, but they have a legislative group that does this. I'm not sure of the entire process, but I suspect that these senators and delegates, they just call into legislative services and say, give me a bill to do A, B, and C. And in this case, they pulled last year's bill. But a lot of that, even though the bill didn't pass, SDAT agreed to do some of the items that were in the bill. So it was, like I say, a case where I think they would have thrown it back at the senator and made him look a little foolish, so we said, let's get out of it gracefully.
I also want to thank you for the excellent work you're doing, and I was one of a little group that went down with you. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We went to Annapolis. It was you and Tony and me and Bernadette. And I kind of echoed your talking points. But folks, this man, he has done so much intricate work, so many details. I mean, I'm just amazed at the.
Well, as you know, it's not a one-man situation. I've had the privilege of working with this group, Dave Pridgeon, Ted Patterson, Joan Ryder, Tony Passaro, you, the DeLongs, you know, you can go on and on. I've been very fortunate. I just haven't been very successful. And that's what bugs me.
I just wanted to say, as the left is persistent, we have to be persistent too. Just keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. And one other thing I want to say, the assessors that are doing this, it seems very amateurish to me, very amateurish with how they're doing it. And this property taxes, right now, I'm going to scrape together what I can to pay the last of my property taxes for 2015. Already I got the note delinquent if you don't pay them by the end of February or something like that. So it's just incredible. They've got these amateurs, untrained people. It's disgraceful.
Scott, give me one more minute. Let me tell you an interesting story. We just had a PTAB hearing not too long ago. And our assessor, young lady, one of the high school graduates, first time she'd been on our property, first words out of her mouth, this property is grossly under assessed. What happens to be a low-lying property on the bay, it doesn't perk, it floods both from the bay side and from the back side. We have a 100-acre drainage area goes through the property. It can't be developed any further. It's got a 25% slope on one side and 11% on the other side. So anyhow, we had a number of adjustments to this property for over 40 years. She removed them all. Changed our assessment from the 300,000s to the 600,000s. So we went through the assessor and ended up at PTAB. And when we got to PTAB, she testified that the reason she removed all these adjustments is they added to 100%. Well, the system doesn't work that way. They multiply one against the other. So we said to her, well, if you went to Kohl's today and you were offered a 50% plus 50% sale, would you expect to get the product for nothing? Resoundingly, she said yes. And the board upheld her. We went to court to beat it down, and the judge finally reversed it. We're back to 300,000. But that's the type of thing that you're up against. These people, many of them, do not know what the heck they're doing.
Can I just say something, and I apologize for being late, but it just seems like you're quibbling over the extent of the theft in terms of the government stealing our property and trying to achieve a better measure of fairness, when in fact all of it is theft. Okay, it's destroyed our property rights. You don't own anything in this state, because if you fail to remit your property tax obligation to the state, they will take your property. We're renters. So is that the correct approach? To quibble over the
Well, you have
amount
to
of
fight
the
the
theft
system.
and to decide what threshold you'll tolerate it here, but you won't tolerate it there.
But you have to fight the system as it's designed. This
Well,
system is...
you're cooperating with the system, because you're agreeing that if we can just come up with some fair distribution of property tax liabilities, we'll consent to the destruction of our property rights.
Well, unless we can come up with a way to fund government without taxes, that is the universal choice normally. Property taxes first, income taxes second.
So we should all just consent to the theft of our property because it's inevitable, because there's no other way to fund to fund government?
What do you suggest?
What's what?
Yeah, well, seriously, I'm not being.
Voluntary arrangements.
Okay.
I mean, what did we do before, 100 years ago? Before we had this oppressive government, what did we do? How did we fund security? How did we fund national defenses? How did we fund local governments? How did we fund federal government? Before the imposition of federal income taxes.
Do you really think that a voluntary system would work?
Yeah, government was funded largely by tariffs before the imposition.
I mean, you're just, it's just a losing proposition, okay? So you'll get the government, they'll meet you somewhere in the middle if you can create a big enough fuss. And we're gonna still be in the same position where the government will impose this involuntary theft of property. Because we've all consigned ourselves to the fact that there's no other way, right?
But this is only a part of the puzzle. Scott's group here has been fighting all the other issues that we have to deal with. Someday, hopefully, we'll get people to listen to us.
It just seems to me we're
Well, you know,
we're
Mr.
quibbling
Bishop,
over the extent to which we're gonna be rated
It
as
sounds to
citizens
me-
and as
It
taxpayers.
sounds to me like we probably should put you on the agenda for a little talk, because your idea is very intriguing and interesting. I'd like to hear more about it. We should, get in touch with me after the meeting.
Okay.
I'm gonna put you on the agenda.
Okay.
You sound like the guy, with the complaining about the T-tax and the stamp act. And
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Intolerable acts, so.
Yes.
I hope you're seeing that under Paul Revere.
Thanks, Ray. A comprehensive understanding of math is important for fair taxation, I would say.
What are you gonna do? Unless you're ready to.
Okay, so next speaker we have coming up is Christina Trotter, and Christina's going to give us an update on the continuing saga of the Maryland GOP and the local political mugwumps in Carroll County and what they're trying to do to usurp the power of the Central Committee over appointments in Carroll County to the House and the Senate.
Scott. Thank you. Jerry, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Here's my sounding board. Last month, we went over a little, in a little bit of detail with Eugene Craig, who was one of our guests. We went over the happenings in Carroll County with the steering committee appointing a new person for District 5. That person was Joe Getty, and he was appointed into Larry Hogan's cabinet. So of course, you have to backfill that position with someone else from Carroll County. And that would be the responsibility of the Carroll County Republican Central Committee, since Mr. Getty is a Republican. So basically what happened when they decided who they were going to pick, you decide on a process, you follow that process, you nominate someone, you send that appointee to Annapolis. Okay, that's the basic gist of how the process is supposed to work. It's not supposed to be a who's the most popular game. It's not supposed to be who does the governor want kind of a shtick. It's supposed to be the central committee of that party deciding upon who's going to fill that vacancy and sending that nominee's name to the governor. So the Carroll County Central Committee, the Republican Central Committee, decided on a process and went about following that process. They were very systematic about the process. There are 9 people, by the way, on the Central Committee in Carroll County. They publicly called for resumes. I think they got 12 or 14 different resumes. They all had copies of them. They went through the resumes. They came to a public meeting in which anyone was invited to come. They had some public discussion about the resumes and about the different candidates that were putting their names in the hat. At this point, they decided not to make all of the resumes publicly known, because they decided, what if one of those people actually has a full-time job and doesn't want their boss to know, hey, I'm, looking for greener pastures? So they kept the names private for the most part, but a lot of them were public as well. The bigger names were certainly well known as being interested in the position. Then they retired to a closed session meeting so that the 9 of them could discuss the pros and cons of each candidate, have a little bit of debate back and forth without hurting any candidate's feelings, and then make a decision. At that point, you pretty much had a camp that was split almost down the middle, with Justin Reedy and Robin Fraser being the 2 favorites. Both Republicans, both conservative, one of them probably more amenable to the governor's budget and helping him along, but really for the most part they're both good people. They had some discussion about voting records and decided on a vote of 5-4, with the swing vote being the chair of the Central Committee, that they were going to put Robin Fraser's name into the governor's office. That was on Monday that they voted. They decided then after the vote that they would release it to the press after a few days, after they had had a chance to tell all of the candidates, thank you very much for participating, and after they had a chance to tell Robin Fraser, you're going to be our choice. Then they would issue the press release. They would then submit the name once the vacancy is actually announced, which would be after the inauguration and after everything settles down. Now that was Monday, on a Monday evening in, was that February or late January? It might have been early February. So at that point, the press release was actually posted on the website. I have a screenshot of it, but it wasn't good enough to put up on PowerPoint. It really doesn't show up very well. But the screenshot shows it was up there for about a month, that the press release that they had drafted that night. On Thursday morning, the chairman called one of the other committee members and said, hey, did you go down to Annapolis yet and put in that name? And she said, no, there's no vacancy yet, but I'll go check with them again. So Thursday night, they were having another meeting to then appoint someone for District 4. Now, District 4 is actually, it's a split district between Frederick County and Carroll County. So both Frederick and Carroll would have a chance in this circumstance to vote and nominate one person to send to the governor's office. That was what was on the agenda for Thursday night. However, when the whole group came in, about half of the group was kind of, I guess, bowled over or surprised at the fact that 3 people were also in attendance, 2 of them from the governor's cabinet. One was the head of appointments, and also our state GOP staff, who is Joe Cluster. He would be the Republican GOP statesperson or voice. And those three people said, well, we want to talk to you. We request that you give us 3 names for the nomination instead of 1. At this point, the 4 people that were staunchly conservative, staunchly for the person that they're already chosen, said, no, that's not how it works. And the other 5 people, with the chairman now being the swing vote in the other direction, they decided, well, we're going to overrule you, and they voted 5-4 to nominate 3 people instead, at which point the 4 people that refused to give in walked out. And the remaining committee of 5 nominated 3 choices to send to the governor's office. And incidentally, the original choice wasn't one of them at all. So the 4 people on the central committee that thought, well, this is terrible, they started doing their research and looking up law to say, well, how exactly does this work? Because it didn't fit our process. it didn't fit what we had agreed to, and it didn't fit the Maryland Constitution. So the Maryland Constitution actually says that the central committee of that party shall nominate a person to send to the governor's office, and the governor will appoint from that nomination a person to fill the vacancy. They brought this up actually at the Thursday meeting, but no one wanted to hear it. So they took it to court. After a few weeks of fighting publicly, the 4 people on the Central Committee actually took it to their district court. The judge at the district court refused to file a temporary restraining order or hear the case because he said, well, nominate a person, that's way too vague. I don't see anything here, and there's no reason to stop the process. At which point, they went back to their lawyer because they had to lawyer up by now. The state GOP was not interested in listening to them. Their other delegates were not interested in listening to them. Actually, one of the other delegates called them crazier than outhouse rats. No one wanted to hear it, that this was what the actual process was supposed to be, so they had to lawyer up. They went back to their lawyer and said, now what can we do? And he actually found it's something called kind of like ghost hunting for law, where if you are unsure of the intent of a law, what you have to do is go back to where it originated and then each place that it was amended and find those areas where something may have been stricken out of the record or of that bill, and see what was the actual intent of those people when they passed that law. So they went back to 1935, and that's when there was an amendment to this portion of our Maryland Constitution, and they found a Maryland Attorney General's opinion on this specific sentence in our Maryland Constitution, which says, we find in the Senate Journal from 1935 that when this amendment was introduced, it provided the governor shall appoint a person to fill such vacancy from 2 persons whose names shall be submitted. So the Senate said, let's give the governor 2 people. The House then amended that by striking out 2 persons whose name and inserting in lieu thereof a person whose name. So you basically have the clear intent of the law as amended by the House and then passed by both branches, that this was meant to be 1 person nominated, 1 person appointed. They went back to the court with that, and the Court of Appeals was the rest of the Attorney General's quote, only 1 name by the committee was contemplated, and you are so advised. That's what you're supposed to do. That's 1935 Dockford. That's what you do. They went back to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals said, you know what? You've got a good point here, and the Court of Appeals has decided that they're going to hear the case. At which point, of course, the other side of the Carroll County Republican Central Committee had to lawyer up as well. And they lawyered up and did their rebuttal. And this is still actually going on right now in Carroll County, although you don't really see it in our news or in the state news at all. So right now we're waiting for a court decision on this, and everyone's like, well, this is silly. We need to support our governor. It doesn't matter. He got 3 names, he picked 1, let's move on, right? Shut up, who cares? But the real point of this, and who cares, should be anyone who's interested in local government and that wants to come back and take our rights back and actually be statesmen and have a place in local government. This is something that's going to set a precedent for the future and is going to color our appointment process from now on, whether it's a Republican governor dealing with a Republican Central Committee or it's a Democratic governor who's leaning on a Republican Central Committee. And that has far-reaching implications. So why should we care? We have this Maryland Constitution for the same reason we have the U.S. Constitution. it's a system of checks and balances. And it's designed to be so that all three branches that you have are balanced and checked against each other. You have the executive branch in Governor Hogan, the legislative branch, we have our state house and our state senate, and then our judicial branch, which would be the district court that these people had to go to, and then the Court of Appeals, which they also had to go to. The Central Committee is also designed to balance the system or balance these branches, because it's the Central Committee that chooses the nominee from their same party. So you nominate someone, you pick a delegate, that delegate's Republican, your Republican Central Committee gets to choose who would fill that vacancy. Not the governor, not his friends, not anyone else. Your representatives on the Central Committee. It's ensuring that the governor doesn't get to handpick who he wants to put into that slot. I mean, what if they gave him 2 names and he still wasn't satisfied? Could he come back and say more? I want more? I mean, why not? Your Central Committee is supposed to be representing the values of that county. That's why you nominated someone into Central Committee. And we can basically say a Republican in Montgomery County is not going to have the same values as a Republican in Hartford County or Carroll County. So if your governor's from Montgomery County and he wants his buddy in from, a more liberal, on a more liberal bent, then that's what he's going to lean towards. Then we have the judicial branch, which is also right now checking the executive branch and saying, well, was this process correct? What's the plain language meaning of this law? And we can go back to 1935 and see what the intent was. And then were their boundaries overstepped? Not just in pushing the boundaries of a law or of one sentence in the Constitution, but also leaning on elected officials in your Central Committee and putting pressure on them basically to change their minds or change their vote. The 1977 Attorney General opinion did address the issue of, well, what if there are more than one name submitted to the governor? And this is really what the establishment right now is leaning on, saying, well, there's precedent here because it's been done before. We've had more than one person who's been nominated, and then the governor chooses from that. And that's true. That's actually happened. But the 1977 Attorney General's opinion states that the clear intent of the Constitution is for one person. So if they ignore the clear intent of the Constitution, yes, then the governor must choose from those names. But the clear intent is for one name. And that's really what those 4 people in Carroll County are fighting for right now, is for recognition of the process, recognition of their right to choose and nominate one person and send that one person to the governor's office. And we're very hopeful that they do well, but we're proud, I'm proud as a Central Committee member to know them and to say that they're not backing down, they're not kowtowing to bigger names. They're actually fighting for their rights and fighting for what's the right process and the right thing to do.
When did they lawyer up the other side?
I'm not sure if it was during the first court time or during the second court time, but I think it was after the first court decision.
But Michael Karuga with Institute of the Constitution is on the Anne Arundel County Central Committee, and interestingly enough, we meet right in the Maryland GOP offices there, so they are putting extreme pressure on Anne Arundel County to submit 3 names to establish this precedent to undo the court case. And we went loaded to the Central Committee meeting with both barrels of our shotgun loaded, a letter to the governor saying, yeah, we're gonna follow the Constitution. We appreciate your offer of assistance here. The other big thing that I think that is Article 8 in the Maryland Declaration of Rights, where it establishes a right for all citizens that the legislative, executive, and judicial powers of government ought to be forever separate and distinct from each other, and no person exercising the functions of one said department shall assume or discharge the duties of any other. So it's not just in Article 3, Section 13, it's Article 8, which out of the 47 rights in your Maryland Constitution, that one is the separation of powers. And that's backed by Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution that says that they have to guarantee a Republican form of government in every state. And that's the keystone, the separation of powers, and the
Correct, yeah.
distinct branches is the keystone of what makes a Republican form of government. That type of government is the separation of powers. So it's not even necessarily a constitutional issue. It is your right to have these distinct powers. And if the governor gets to say, give me 3 names and picks from them, well, he's assumed the powers of the legislative branch.
This is going to come up also in the next Republican convention, where I understand, and Karen, you've probably heard this too, that the state GOP is working on a referendum or a change to the charter, which would actually make this part of the process. You nominate 3 people, and you send 3 people to the governor's office, which is completely, it's going to be a terrible route.
Well, actually, this is in Anne Arundel County's bylaws.
3?
Already in Anne Arundel County Central Committee's bylaws, not in the GOP, but in our Central Committee bylaws. And the pressure's coming from somewhere, I'm not exactly sure where, but the pressure's coming so far from somewhere that even after we published, the Central Committee published its process, they wanted us to amend our bylaws to change it to so we could split.
Oh, your bylaws say one person?
One
Okay.
name.
Vicki?
How can the Republican Central Committee bylaws of Anne Arundel County, or any county for that matter, usurp the Constitution of the state?
Right.
But they're supposed to be in accordance with the Constitution, and ours were written to be in accordance with the Constitution. And we're being asked by Governor Obama, his name's Hogan, right? Because I forget, they're both violating the Constitution, I'm not sure who he is. But, the Republicans, the very first thing they do when they get in office is exactly what they want us to get up in arms about Obama doing. Violating the Constitution. It's our document, it's our compact with our government, and they put pressure on us to violate it? It's ridiculous, it's reprehensible.
Dave?
This issue really burns me up, and you guys remember last month I talked about the crap they pulled at the last Republican presidential convention, with Ron Paul. Has nothing to do with what people think about Ron Paul, but he played by the rules, and they changed the rules under him at the convention. I talked about Terry Moore and what she did to undermine the Central Committee in Cecil County. And listen, the people in this room, we want to take our damn country back, all right? We've had enough. So what are we doing? We're playing by the rules here. We're trying to play by the established rules. The Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Maryland. So we're trying to play by the rules. So what does that mean for us, all right? People in this room, we have busted our ass to get people elected to county central committees. Just this last election, to get 5 people out of the 12 elected, people in this room might not know this, we went door to door to 26,000 houses just to get 5 people elected. And when we did it in 2010, how did the empire strike back at us then? Because they don't want to hear about liberty. The empire strikes back. Then you all know in this room, this last year they had House Bill 1513, where they tried to put all the delegates from Harford County onto our Central Committee so they could vote the Liberty members off. All right? So, we defeated that. We fought hard again this election. We were able to get 5 Liberty people out of the 12 on our Central Committee, and this is exactly the same thing that's happened in Carroll County, and this is why you need to care about it, because the people that are standing up for the Constitution over there are the Liberty people that we fought to get elected in that county, okay? We've got connections all over the state, and we're getting people elected in different counties so that we can take this damn party back so that it'll fight for us once again. That's what we're doing. And those people over there are like people like Kathy Fuller, okay? She's the aide to Richard Rothschild, who has been here numerous times. He's a county commissioner in Carroll. And Richard's a guy that took the bull by the horns and was a guy that was getting slapped around the state for really taking on the rain tax and exposing what that was all about. And now he's getting slapped around in the county for taking on Common Core out there, the way that he's taking on. So these are people that are around Richard Rothschild, that are Liberty people that want government out of our lives. And basically, you know, by the rules, okay, they got elected. They're trying to follow the rules to get a liberty-minded person into the House of Delegates, and the Empire is saying no, and they're trying to crap on them once again, and that's why this is important.
And it's a fight for which Republican, which conservative Republican you're going to put into the office, because they're not. Neither Justin Reedy or the woman who was nominated at first, Robin Fraser, are liberals, moderates by any sense of the word. But the difference is that one of them would rubber stamp Larry Hogan's budgets, and that's a big deal. That's a very big deal. If any of you, you wanna reach out, I would suggest Diana Waterman would be the point of contact at this point. We really don't have any wherewithal in the courts. That's being fought already. But this is going to be a fight that comes up with our spring convention, and it's going to be really ugly. And that's where the pressure needs to be on our state GOP. Any other questions?
Well, if I can ask for some assistance, if you all can get Chairman Nathan Volke of Anne Arundel County Central Committee, his email off of I think it's nvolke@aagop.org. Email him and plead with him, please follow the Constitution. Because Kathy Vitale, Delegate Kathy Vitale in District 33, just had her investiture as a judge last night, so we're having to fill a delegate position, and they're definitely leaning on Anne Arundel County to be the backing to
Right.
get Robin's
You're going to be the
case
precedent.
and thrown, and Kathy's, all their hard work thrown in.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. That's N. Volke.
And I think it's
Volke?
at aagop.org, but if you go to the AAGOP, and it's easy, you just click on it, and it'll email right to it for you. But I think that would be great to get other people that, want the Constitution followed, and his bylaws, published bylaws.
And if you get a chance, Karen, to put that on our Harford County or Facebook page or website, that would be great. Anyone else? All right, thank you.
Well, I just want to say it should be an ugly fight, because it's just another example of the political establishment usurping the power of the people that were elected to represent the people of the county, and not elected politicians. These elected politicians think that these Central Committee people work for them, when it's the other way around. So it seems like the political establishment in the Maryland GOP has a problem with their super citizens that they are always crowing so much about. So when you have a politician come up and slap you on the back and say what a great job you are, what a great activist you are, we really need people like you, you can remember this. Because they say it and they smile to your face, but they don't mean it. And it's just like the song, it's like, beware of the slap on the back, because it just might hold you back. And it's true then, it's true now. So that brings us up to open mic. So we got a couple people up. We got Dan Galuzzo, who has a big announcement, and then Betty LeBrun, who's going to talk about a couple of hearings in Annapolis.
Can we pass the bucket while they're talking?
And we can certainly pass the bucket while we're
Hello. We hadn't been here for a while. We've been thinking of
Say one
something.
thing.
Is it too loud?
No, just one thing real quick. We have to pay for this room, so nobody here like gets any money for doing anything. I think you all know that, so if you guys can be as generous as you possibly can to help us pay for this room tonight, great.
Okay. I love being surrounded by patriots. We haven't been here for a while. We've been busy thinking of things. And tonight, among patriots, I want to announce a possibility of something. I think I'm going to run for president. Okay? And here's my platform. First off, I got a slogan for my program, and that is, I can't do any worse than what they're doing, and I think I could probably do better. Now, I know it's not exactly a catchy slogan, but it's real. Here's what I would do first. Here's my platform. First, I would eliminate all personal income tax, all federal personal income tax eliminated. The second, I would rescind all of Obama's and Bush's executive orders. Third, I would call for a flat tax of 4% for all corporations and reduce capital gains tax to 0. Fourth, I would shut down Common Core immediately. Fifth, I would give a 30% tax-free raise and free health care for all of our servicemen and women below the rank of captain. Immediately, I would immediately close the borders. I would immediately start the Keystone Pipeline. I would issue permits for oil, gas, and coal on all public and private lands to make us independent of foreign oil and anything foreign. I would shut down the EPA, the IRS, the DHS, the TSA, Department of Agriculture, Department of Education, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and 90% of the State Department. Next, I would stop all foreign aid until they prove that they have an allegiance to us.
Yes.
After that, I would execute every prisoner at Gitmo. 12, we would deport all illegal aliens immediately. It'd take a little bit of time, but we'll do that. Third, I would arrest Eric Holder, Hillary Clinton, Lois Lerner, and probably most of the Democratic Party. I would eliminate all the czars. We would have no more czars in government. And I would reduce the size of government by 75%. I would rescind the 17th Amendment. Does anybody know what that is except, where's Scott?
Yes.
The 17th Amendment is the amendment that allowed senators to vote. They were appointed, usually by the state, by the governor, as an advisory to the House of Representatives. I would rescind the 17th Amendment and get every one of these pompous little princesses and princes out of our way so we can do some business. How's that sound? Okay. Third, I would rescind Obamacare, all bank bailouts, and all lobbyists. Then I would produce mandatory draft, bring it back, get all these young men and women in draft for 2 years. As soon as they come out of high school, give them a purpose in life and put them in the military. Also, I would make it so that all products that are consumed by Americans have to be made in America. I would eliminate all inheritance taxes whatsoever. Now that's what I'll do in my first week. I won't take any money from any corporations. No one can give me more than $5. I'll take no checks, it's all cash. And I'll run for just one term, and probably within a month I'll straighten everything out, or someone will get rid of me. I think really, all joking aside, we love our country. We know that it's in serious danger. I do not advocate violence, but if you study history, there is nothing that turns over by itself. This government will not let go of itself. So we have to be smart in what we're doing. We got to try to stick together, and we got to pray really hard. I thank you all. God bless you.
It is almost impossible to follow that. Oh, gosh. 2 hearings, in fact, I think Vicki gave us these sheets about hearings. But look, I've got an important update. I talked to Glenn Glass's office just today. I talked to Sarah, and then she turned me over to Glenn himself. Your date for March the 5th, they have had to change that about the opting out of the smart meters being penalized, all that money. Boy, I want to go and give them a little piece of my mind on that. That is so unfair. And the miracle is, Senator Nathaniel McFadden, a Democrat from Baltimore City, is on board with this. So there is a little bit of hope. I mean, really. But it's a Jewish holiday. My pastor's a Messianic Jew. It's Purim. It's the Queen Esther thing, and it's a minor holiday. But he said some of them apparently in the probably Montgomery County, they want that day off. So it is not going to be on March the 5th. The date is to be announced. Okay. And I only ran 6 copies. I didn't know if anybody would be interested. I've got Glenn Glass's phone and fax. I intend, unless there's a horrible weather event and that the roads are bad, I'm going to go over and testify in favor of his 2 bills, HB 508 and 516, to do away with us having to pay the penalty for opting out of the so-called smart meter. So I'm going to testify on that. I've got another one on here. You didn't have it on your list. So that will be announced. I will go on Tom Marr's program, and I'll announce when that it's going to be held. They'll know by 1 week from today, okay? But it will not be March the 5th. The other one, there's a hearing. Pat McDonough wants to bring back the death penalty for those that murder a corrections officer, a firefighter, or a first responder. And I realize that some people have a religious objection to capital punishment. I, as a born-again Christian, and my pastor is a Messianic Jew, we both believe in capital punishment for certain circumstances. And I think this is one of them. And it is biblical that you execute somebody who deliberately plans out. And by the way, that commandment about thou shalt not kill, in Hebrew, it's retzach. That doesn't mean kill by executing or in war. It means premeditate murder. That's a different thing. Okay, so it is biblical to carry out capital punishment, and I am going to testify. And that is Tuesday, March the 7th. That's St. Patrick's Day, 1 o'clock. And I have the info here. His fax, his number. He needs some help on testifying against that. Okay, and thank you very much.
Did Delegate McDonough illuminate to you like why it was worse to kill a first responder or a cop than anybody in this room?
That's a good question, and the thing is, you
You
can't.
get the death penalty for that, but not for killing anybody in this room?
I would like to see it brought back for those that rape and kill a child, when you've got DNA evidence inside that child. I think that my pastor thinks that they should even cut off his hands and feet and then execute him. And that's the way he feels about it. Anybody that abuses a child.
that's the Christian
and
way.
that kills a child. The point is, you can't do it all at once. It's going to be one little incremental step at a time, the way the left does. Just try to get it, like if a guy's serving life for murder, and then he kills a corrections officer, what are they going to do? Keep him in jail another lifetime? I mean, he doesn't have another lifetime to give. So they want to get it as a bargaining chip, so that maybe they'll think twice about killing a corrections officer or a first responder. But you have to do it incrementally, Scott.
Okay. All right, Vicki's got some legislative action and also an announcement about some fun stuff that we're going to be doing.
Okay, all right, just a little bit of housekeeping here. How many folks here got our email? We send an email out at least once every month prior to our meeting to announce the meeting and tell you all what's on the agenda. How many people in here got that email? Okay. How many people got the robocall? How many people got the robocall? If you got the robocall, raise your hand. Okay. How many people in this room got a handwritten letter or a phone call? Anybody got a personal phone call or a handwritten letter?
From who?
From, it would have been Joe Fleckenstein.
Well, I got a phone call.
Who'd you get a phone call from?
It spoke to the headquarters of Campaign for Liberty,
And what was the phone call about?
mainly a donation.
A donation, yeah. No, this would have been an invitation reminding you about this meeting. How many people came here tonight because they got a phone call, a letter, an email? How many of you came here because of that?
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, so emails or phone calls? And has anybody seen our meetup group? We have a new meetup group. It's kind of a new way of, it's like a social media way of linking up with like-minded people. Well, it's just a reminder. It's an online reminder. It's called a meetup group. And Harford County Campaign for Liberty has one. Has anybody seen that yet? Okay. All right. The reason I'm asking you all this is we're trying to find ways to increase. Remember a year ago, a year and a half ago, we would have 100 people in this room.
It's election season.
We're trying to, well, it was election season, but then it wasn't. I mean, we went a whole year with excellent attendance. So we're trying to find a way to improve our attendance. So if any of you have any ideas about that, please talk to any of us after the meeting. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is we've got some really great activities coming up. Our April meeting, our monthly meeting, the last April of the month, and I think that's the 28th. We're having a speaker by the name of Tom DeWeese. Tom DeWeese is a national leader in the property rights and anti-Agenda 21 movement. He has been in the trenches on these issues for many, many, many years. This man flies all over the country, writes books, gets paid big time money to speak, and he's coming to speak to us. So put April's meeting on your calendar. It's something that you do not want to miss. It will be awesome. You're having an opportunity for free to come down here and meet a national, someone who speaks nationally, who speaks well and has a lot to say. He's very inspiring. I know you're going to love it. Come and bring a friend. We also are going to have an event in May, on May the 16th. We're taking a busload, maybe two, folks down to Gettysburg, the Gettysburg National Park. We will have some real Civil War reenactors with us. One of them's in the room right now. Can you guess who it is? We are going to have some Civil War reenactors with us that are going to take us from battle site to battle site, and in a very authentic way, bring those events to life for us. So this is going to be, there's going to be some cost involved. It's probably going to be between $30 or $40, depending on what exactly we do. But put that on your calendar, May 16th. That is going to be a bus trip. It'll be the majority of the day, and it will be awesome. Tell your friends about it. If you know any homeschoolers or kids who take AP history, let them know about it. Now, one more thing, Dave, and then I'll get to you. We are not exactly sure how to structure the day. There's been some talk about whether or not we spend all the day in the field. We would be 6 hours going from battlefield to battlefield with our reenactors. Or should we spend some of that time at the visitor center? There's a 45-minute movie there that kind of sets the tone for it. And also there's a painting, there's a museum, there's a couple other things to see there as well. That would raise the cost of the event by about $10, and it would also give us less time on the battlefield. We'd probably only have 4.5 hours on the battlefield. So to help us make up our minds, who in this room would like to spend 6 hours on the battlefield and forego the visitor center, the movie, the museum, and the cyclorama? One.
I don't care, I'm interested either way.
1, 2. Either way, I want people who only want to spend time in the battlefield. 6 hours in the battlefield. Who would want to go and do 4 hours in the battlefield and then have some time in the visitor center? Okay, I see a lot of folks whose hands didn't go up, so do you have no opinion? No opinion. Okay.
So many times, don't
All right,
do that.
so we haven't really decided yet. We're sort of wondering, you know, we want to put together an event that you guys are going to like. So that is going to come in, that will be useful information. But put it on your calendar, May 16th. This is going to be awesome. I'm talking Civil War reenactment. You're going to love it. All right, so now that brings me to why I'm really up here. Betty, thank you very much for giving an overview of the legislation that you were familiar with. I focus mostly on some interesting legislation, mostly that is being put forward by a Harford County delegation, some of it out of county that I will mention. And each of you should have this paper. I think everybody got one. If you didn't get it, Christina, did anybody not get this? Christina, would you mind passing it out to the folks? Thank you very much. First of all, on the very top of your paper, it says to review legislation, and it gives you a website. That website is the Maryland Legislative website. This is a website you should all become familiar with. You can go there, you can see what delegates are in your area, what bills they're sponsoring, what committees they sit on. If you're interested in if you're interested in a gun control repeal bill and you want to watch how it progressed in committee, who was bad-mouthing it in committee, who was talking it up in committee, and who voted against it in committee, you can watch that. You can watch the videos. Pretty much you can check out everything. You can track these bills online. You can see if Susan McComas is your legislator, you can see what bills she's putting forward. You can see what committee she's on and how she voted on different bills. So if any of you have access to a computer, and I'm sure most of you do, go to that website and play around with it. I was in my pajamas till 2 o'clock this afternoon fiddling around on that website, and I could have been there until my husband came home for dinner. So please familiarize yourself with that website. I'm going to really fly through this because I don't want to give short shrift to Miss Delamater over there. We're running out of time. But Robin Grammer, he's a Baltimore delegate in District 6. This is a guy who is a Liberty guy. He's a bill champion for us, and he is. And let me tell you, he beat entrenched Democrats in his district. So this is somebody that we want to really keep an eye on and see how he promotes the cause of liberty for us. He has basically put in the Gun Safety Act of 2013. He's put in a repeal for that. That's being heard in the judiciary at 310 March 10th at 1 p.m. Glenn Glass. Betty mentioned a couple of things, and as you look at this, I'm not going to go over everything, but you can see the name of the bill number. This will give you a starting point if you go to the website. What committee it's being heard in and the date. Also, if it's being cross-filed in the Senate. I won't mention the smart meter bills. Glenn's been on the forefront of that for a long time now. What I will say is I was a little disappointed by the lack of co-sponsors he had on those bills, and that comes from our own Harford County delegation. You can look and see who's co-sponsored these bills and who's standing behind him. And there were some names that I did not see. Glenn has a bill, House Bill 417. It's called the Police Profiling Right to Carry Permit. This is an awesome bill, and I haven't really heard much about it. It's being heard in the judiciary, 310, at 1 p.m. And what this bill does is it prohibits license plate readers from being used to identify people that have conceal and carry permits, and using that information as the justification for stopping people. And you may recall 2 or 3 months ago, a young gentleman from Florida had a conceal and carry permit, was traveling north with his family. His license plate was scanned. They used that license plate to identify him as someone having a concealed carry permit in Florida, and this man was stopped. Now, I don't know about you, but I mean, that's violating a whole slew of rights, and this is a bill that I think we should really be encouraging our people to look at. Susan McComas, I'm gonna let you guys just kind of go through this on your own, see what you've got, because I really don't want to take up too much time from Karen. You can see that Teresa Riley has cross-filed a bill to repeal, again, the Firearm Safety Act, and also a rain tax repeal. There's like a gazillion rain tax repeal bills up there. Kathy Shalega, District 7, has cross-filed a bill with Justin Reedy in the Senate. This bill is to prohibit a VMT tax, or a vehicle miles travel tax. This is also a very important bill. Remember, they want to tax you for every mile you drive, which means putting a device in your car and tracking you where you go. This brings us to Marian Lasanti, District 34A. Unfortunately, I didn't see Miss Lasanti's name on any of the liberty-preserving or liberty-returning bills that are being put forth. She's not on she's not on the rain tax repeal bill, any of them. And when I spoke with her legislative aide, he made it very clear that she supports the rain tax, will continue to promote the rain tax, and will not be a part of any repeal. So she will, if that gets out of committee and onto the floor, she'll be voting against that. She hasn't signed on to any of the gun repeal legislation, the safety, the gun safety bill repeal, none of that. None of the bills to soften that or repeal it, she hasn't signed on to any of them. But here's what she has put forward. She is sponsoring a creation of debt bill. Basically what it is taking taxpayer money to create a $100,000 grant as a gift to her buddies in Havre de Grace to purchase and maintain a fire and rescue boat. That's $100,000 of your taxpayer. That's coming out of your pocket. Those are taxpayer dollars that are being used to go to Havre de Grace solely for the purpose of Havre de Grace. She wants to beef up parking in early voting centers. She wants to make sure that the parking is adequate in early voting centers. And if you read the fiscal note on this, you'll see that this will come at a cost to counties. Again, growing government, your tax dollars. But perhaps the most egregious one is House Bill 88-4, which is the counting of properly cast votes. Now, a little bit of history on this. Miss Lasanti, unfortunately, lost her mother last year after the primary and before the general. And Miss Lasanti's mom had cast an absentee ballot, obviously, for her daughter. But unfortunately, she left us before the general election, and when those absentee ballots were counted, by law, her ballot had to be rejected because she had deceased. That's the law. Now, I can understand Miss Lasanti for sentimental reasons, wanting to have her mother's vote counted, but is this a good reason to put forth legislation? Now, I did a little bit of research, and in that week of early voting last year, a little over 800 people expired in Maryland. So out of 3.5 million voters, 800 people, we don't even know if those 800 people voted. So the amount of people that this legislation would affect is minuscule. I can see Ms. Lasanti and all of our delegates, because this is cross-filed by Senator Norman in the Senate. I just cannot see the use of this bill. If they are that concerned, and for instance, her legislative aide told me that they're concerned that our war fighters overseas will cast a ballot that will then be thrown out should they die in battle. Well, if our folks are so concerned about the disenfranchisement of our military voters, perhaps they can put forward legislation that will see to it that military ballots go out on time, come back on time, and are counted correctly, which is a problem every single year. Every single year. So, while my heart does go out to Miss Lasanti, and her mother was a lovely lady, and I'm sure if this bill passes, her name will be on it. But I would encourage Ms. Lasanti to be less motivated by personal experience, unless that personal experience touches upon a majority of her constituents. So I was a little disappointed in my former county council person with some of the legislation that she did and didn't put forward. I have some other things to say, but I really don't want to take up any more time from poor Karen. So Dave, you wanted to say something real quick. I know I kind of...
Oh, just, on the bills, the first one by Robin Grammer. Just so you're aware, Robin Grammer is the former state coordinator, Maryland state coordinator for Campaign for Liberty, and we got him elected to the House this last election cycle. And then HB 454, the VMT tax, the vehicle mileage tax, that is a bill that we crafted and had introduced, and our bill champion on this bill is Justin Reddy. So, and then real quick on the Gettysburg trip, you know, I've been a Civil War reenactor over 30 years. Before I got politically involved, I raised over $9 million for battlefield preservation. Those of you that are familiar with the Pickett Pettigrew assault at Gettysburg, where the Confederates stopped at the road there, had to tear down the rail fence, I'm the person that buried that modern power line along that 2.25 mile road right there, raised all the money and buried that. I know Gettysburg like the back of my hand. Our intentions is to take you to places like Willoughby Run and take you down there in the woods and describe to you how the, you know, 26 North Carolina, for instance, lost 10 color bearers within 9 minutes and suffered over 600 casualties on that piece of soil you're going to step on right there. So I think you'll get a lot out of the trip, whoever goes.
Yeah, so please, May 16th, put it on your calendar. This is something, bring your grandkids, bring your family, tell your neighbors about it. This is going to be a day, I think, that none of us forget. So, real quick, because we want to get Karen out.
Okay, it's with respect to House Bill 417.
Yes.
I guess my question is, why would we try to engage with a pro-gun control legislature when there is no statute in the state of Maryland that would require the Maryland State Police or the Maryland Transportation Authority to interrogate our license plates to know whether we have a concealed carry permit or not? Larry Hogan is supposed to be one of us, a Republican, that we supported. He appointed just recently a new Maryland State Police Superintendent, and has, as a Republican, a Director of Public Safety, another Republican. Why would we not engage with the governor himself?
Well, I guess...
Why we're wasting our time going through the legislature.
And you know what? Again, you have some great ideas, and I'm loving your ideas, and I think maybe you should expand on them at one of our meetings. But out of respect to Karen, who came all the way up from Anne Arundel County, I want her to come up here and give her some time.
It's a long time to drive up here.
Right. I don't want her to have come up here for nothing, because she's got some awesome information for us.
No.
Oh, and there's a video to show.
Our rights do not come from God. That's your faith. That's my faith. But that's not our country. Our laws come from the collective agreement and compromise.
I know that was a little difficult to hear, but that's a video that's been going around that was played on CNN. And that's Chris Cuomo, who comes from a prominent Democratic family that apparently believes that our rights come from. He believes that our rights come from a collective agreement and compromise. But where do our rights come from? Do they come from civil government? If they do come from civil government, can they just take them away whenever they want? What are rights? Does anybody know what the proper definition of a right is? What are privileges? Are they separate from each other? What is freedom? What does liberty really mean? You're the Campaign for Liberty. Do you actually have the proper definition of what liberty means? Do you know what it meant to our founders who first used it? In the 1828 dictionary, which is by Noah Webster, it actually has a greater understanding of what these terms meant before they have been transformed. As you know, many of our words have been transformed by the human secular movement that's come into our country and de-Christianized us, taken us away from what our roots are, what we are as Americans. And this is the first definition of the 10 definitions that appear in 1828, all for liberty. As you see, it's a freedom of physical restraint and a freedom of control of the mind. And I think we can all agree that that's a pretty good definition of liberty, how we want to live. Free of physical constraint, and to be free, to not be indoctrinated, to not be propagandized, to be able to make our own decisions for ourselves. But the second definition of liberty actually has the more pertinent definition of liberty, which guarantees our rights and guarantees our liberty. And that is that this is a restraint and a freedom to act except within the constraint and control of the laws of nature. Does anyone else know where the laws of nature also appears? In the Declaration of Independence. It's what God's laws are, what the rules of the universe are. Regardless of what I think, I can try to deny that God is in control of this world, and I can pretend, just like that God's not in control of this world, that gravity doesn't exist. But how many of you, just because you want to believe gravity doesn't exist, want to go jump off of an 8-story building because you say gravity doesn't exist? Who's willing to try that? Well, to deny God is even more dangerous than to deny gravity. And it says right here, exactly that. A restraint of natural liberty, not necessary or expedient for the public, is tyranny or oppression. So when the government is scanning any license plate as you freely travel on the roadways that you pay for, you should be free to travel and not be scanned. I don't know that when we had, used horses as transportation, that they were scanning the taillights of our horses. We should also not expect that out of our current government. And then down here it talks a little about civil liberty, that the restraints to civil liberty are the laws, and they're essential. And when they are laws, we all must abide by those laws. We'll go on to the definition of freedom. You see here, this is 8 definitions of freedom in the 1828 dictionary. And the first one says, see liberty. With the only difference being between liberty, the distinction between liberty and freedom, is that restraint. That restraint comes from knowing and understand the laws of nature, to follow those, to be in accordance with God's law. And here we see rights. It's actually more distinctive of that restraint, that understanding, that responsibility that you have, not to yourself, but to a higher power, to God. Comes out in what it says here. In social and political affairs, that is right which is consonant to the laws and customs of a country, provided these laws and customs are not repugnant to the laws of God. So again, it establishes that standard, that our laws have to be in accordance with God's law, the principles that are established in His Word and in what He directs us to do. And many of those things that He directs us to do are good for the benefit of society, of the greater people, as well as for individual liberty and personal property, and the things that you stand for as a group, Campaign for Liberty. You did choose the best word to encompass what it means to be an American, to have the liberty. And we see privileges here, advantages and favors and benefits. Those are things that can be given and taken away. And these are distinctives that we need to know and understand when we discuss these things, because it's important to see how they fill into many of the matters that we deal with. That you have a right to property that was discussed here, and you have a right not to pay taxes on that property, and those things need to be known and understood so that you can discuss them properly and fight for them, because if you don't know what they are, you don't know that you have them, and you don't know how to fight for them. So the standards that we have are the greatest protection of liberty, and the standards are the rules that we all must abide by, so that we're permitted to live free and independent lives, and to also have government out of our lives so that we can do that, so that that 12-ounce drink there can be consumed by Mr. DeLong without Mayor Bloomberg coming and taking it away from him. We have God's law, which is the laws of natures and nature's God, which is the Bible and the design of the universe. We have our country's laws, the Declaration of Independence, which gives credence to the laws of natures and nature's God. We have the U.S. Constitution, and then we have the distinction of the Bill of Rights, those things that the government should protect and defend for you. Those things that even the government can't take away. They're not privileges. Even the government cannot remove them from you. And then we have our state's law, the Maryland Constitution. And I have one up here with me, and the most important thing in the Maryland Constitution is the Maryland Declaration of Rights, because about half of the other part of the Constitution, the articles, are all related to the city of Baltimore. But those first 47 rights you have in your Maryland Constitution, as opposed to the 10 you have in the United States Constitution, are those things that most guarantee how you live, because government should be done at the smallest level, at the local level. And these rights are very important. As I said, there are 47 articles. The most recent was added in 1994, which was victims' right. And actually, if you read into the victims' rights, for crime, they really say that the government should do it, but if the government doesn't do it, there's nothing you can do about the government not protecting you as a victim of crime. They guarantee all aspects of personal liberty and, believe it or not, economic freedom. Our framers of our Maryland Constitution first wrote this Maryland Constitution back in 1776, the first draft. The second draft, or the draft that we're currently under, came in 1867, which is just a couple of years after the war between the states that you're going to be touring on. And it's going to be eye-opening when you see what kinds of things are in this Maryland Declaration of Rights. We have Article 1. And I mean, that right there is something that will pretty soon get you arrested by the Department of Homeland Security if you say it too loud and too often in public. That all government of right originates from the people, is founded in compact only and instituted solely for the good of the whole, and that they have at all times the inalienable right to alter, reform, or abolish their form of government in such a manner as they deem expedient. So when Governor Hogan's first act is to violate the Constitution, not only do we have a right, but we have a duty to abolish that form of government. Article 4, the people of the state have the sole and exclusive right of regulating the internal government, and the police thereof, as a free, sovereign, and independent state. I don't know exactly what your system is up here with your police, but in Anne Arundel County, our sheriff is basically a figurehead that hands out a bunch of subpoenas and evicts a bunch of people that don't pay their rent on time. He has no real power. The power of appointment comes from the county executive, who appoints a chief of police, who, I don't know if you followed Anne Arundel County politics in the last few years, but we've had 3 of them removed in less than 2 years because of misconduct. We had a county councilman go to jail and a county executive go to jail. And guess what? The county executive was a Republican. And the chiefs of police were Republican. So what protection do you have? The sheriff is somebody that you elect. And it says the people have the right to regulate the police. So does that mean the county executive gets to appoint them, or that you get to elect him? So if you don't have a sheriff, that's one of the most important protections you can have. And as you see, it's guaranteed in the Maryland Constitution. We have Article 15 on taxation. I'm sure that Roy was very familiar with Article 15, which establishes the way taxes are supposed to be done. They are not supposed to be arbitrary and capricious. They are not supposed to be full of exemptions. It's supposed to be the same for everybody unless you're a pauper, and then you don't have to pay as a pauper for the conduct of government that you shouldn't, as a pauper, have to pay. So at a certain rate, you should kind of, through the Maryland Constitution, pay no taxes. But otherwise, everybody should pay the same. And it's already in. You don't need to change the law, you just need to follow the ones you have. And that's not even a law, that's a right. Article 23 is on the duty of the jury. It's one of the ones, I don't know if anyone's been to jury duty recently, but the orientation you get from the clerks of the court state that you are to judge the facts of the case. It's not what the Maryland Constitution says. You're not only supposed to judge the facts of the case, but you're to judge the law. The law. So when they inform you of what your duty is as a juror, They are violating the Constitution, and they get this through some court opinion that says, well, the Constitution doesn't say what it really says. Doesn't mean what it says. How often do we hear, I would quote my pastor on this one, tyrants in black robes telling us things that make no sense. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're telling that the Constitution doesn't say you're to judge the law. If the law's bad, like the surveillance law, throw it out. Dismiss them. Who cares? Guilty or not, the law's bad. You can't be guilty of violating a law that's a bad law that should not be in place. We have Article 29. You can see what they thought about armies. The standing armies are dangerous to liberty and ought not to be raised or kept up without the consent of the legislator. So not only do we have what armies should be, but look at the internal armies we have in this country that you can't even touch because they're called federal law enforcement. If that's not a standing army waiting to break down your door. Yeah, local police, look how militarized they are. Well, you know, we're getting it all cheap back from Afghanistan, so of course it's good for your police department to buy it. Article 41 is what is my favorite one because it's got the word odious in it, but it also speaks on economic freedom that our founders back in 1776 recognized that the Public Service Commission was going to be full of it. Because monopolies are odious and contrary to the spirit of a free government and the principle of commerce and ought not to be suffered. So these smart meters and all the rest of it shouldn't be in place in the first place. They shouldn't be there because we ought not suffer them. And Article 44 is the provision, this one actually was put in just after the war between the states, because as you know, our favorite tyrant Lincoln decided to suspend habeas corpus in Maryland and arrest half the legislature and the governor and send them out of the state, and we've been oppressed as a state ever since 1861, occupied and oppressed since then. The provisions of this Constitution of the United States and of this state apply as well in time of war as in time of peace, and any departure therefrom or violation thereof under the plea of necessity or any other is subversive of good government and tends to anarchy and despotism. So if you're not following the United States Constitution and the Maryland State Constitution, you're a despot. And our founders knew and understood this. They gave us these protections, and you can learn about these protections because Institute on the Constitution is the only place that you can study the Maryland Constitution. Surprisingly, neither law school teaches the Maryland Constitution. The only place, so you don't need to know the Maryland Constitution to practice law in the state of Maryland. They don't even offer one course on it. Not only can you not study it, not only is it not required, they don't even have a course to be able to do it. So the best way to protect and ensure your economic freedom and your property and guarantee your liberty is to know what's in this document so that you can be better informed than the government officials. And that's not hard because they think 50% off of 50% is zero. So, you know, I encourage you, we brought some with us. We have many affordable ways to do it. We're willing to work with your group to come and so you all don't have to drive down to Institute on the Constitution. We have a broadcast where we can put the class on here, kind of work with you. It's 12 lectures, about 40 minutes per lecture, but we can kind of do super Saturdays or whatever. So I know Vicki asked me to ask if anyone's interested in possibly studying the Maryland Constitution. After we had a group in Anne Arundel County study it, we actually went and moved into developing another group called Local Advocacy, Guiding Government from the Grassroots, that became very active in our local county council politics. And if any of you follow Anne Arundel County politics, you see that our founder, Michael Peruka, was elected to the county council and is actually moving forward with a complete repeal of the rain tax in Anne Arundel County. With that, take any questions that you might have or encourage you to visit Joe and Neil over the things that we brought. Neil Moylan is my wingman recording me, and Joseph is my brother over at the book table. And we thank you for the many wonderful things you've done up here. We have several friends that come here. Christina, somebody I met recently, but other people that have been involved with Harford County's Campaign for Liberty and are quite complimentary of the efforts that you've done. So we applaud you for the activism that you've had. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Karen. Hey, Karen, thanks a lot. Hey, one thing I did want to ask you though, real quick, is are any of these courses that you have, can you take them online?
Yes,
You can?
the Maryland Constitution is available online. Actually, the Maryland Constitution is, I believe, free online to watch the videos, but then if you want to get them for a much lower price. Then we have many affordable options. We actually even offer it in such a way that if you want to bring people from the outside to give you walkway discounts for the books that you could all use as a fundraiser, even to group. So I know Vicki has my information, Christina does too, but there's plenty of ways to explore it. And I actually became, after studying, then I started with the duty of the jury course, then the U.S. Constitution course, and then the Maryland course, and really to really understand liberty and all of these things, it's most important, I think, to even rather than the United States Constitution, is to study the Maryland Constitution, because it was the one document that gave me the opportunity to go down and start battling with the county council. My brother, Joseph, was the president of the Homeowners Association, and we went down there because of some development they were trying to put into his neighborhood, and it was a bunch of corporate welfare that, like Roy talked about, where these people were going to pay $1 for taxes for the next 40 years on $1 million worth of property. And it was just ridiculous. And we went down there, and I could not believe, as bad as it was at the federal level, and as bad as I knew it to be at the state level, I thought, I'm protected. We have a Republican county executive, and we have a Republican majority in the county council. We're going to go down there, and they're going to listen to reason, they're going to act on common sense.
And they didn't?
They were the biggest group of clowns I've met yet. And it's a clown factory. They bring them in at the county council level and they move them on up, as long as you are willing to do whatever the Republican establishment, this isn't a Republican club, right?
No.
As long as you do whatever the Republican establishment wants you to do and suck whatever toes they want you to suck on to get moved up, that's exactly what they do with you. And it's repulsive.
Well, I personally would like to learn more about the Maryland Constitution, because I think I'm correct in this, Maryland is one of the few states that gives the people of the state the power of jury nullification, where you can judge the facts as well as the law. And we're loaded down with bad law, and as these gun laws come through and everything else, jury nullification is going to be a more and more important thing to know about.
And that's why it's important, not only we have the Maryland Constitution, but we have that duty of the jury course that teaches you that and teaches you how to, kind of fly under the radar and get onto the jury, and then how you can affect that. Richard Rothschild's a good friend of IOTC, and whenever I come to things, I just think, the commentary series that he did a couple years ago for us, they do all these things because we let them. And we let them out of ignorance, ambivalence, and apathy. And that's why you need to get educated and informed today, regardless of, we're not running a Ponzi scheme on this. Michael's dumped way too much money into this. Liam can attest to it. He's been around for 15 years. We do this because we want to fight the Leviathan. We want you to be informed. We want you to be instructed on it. And we want to take back our country. And the only way to do it is one county at a time.
Yep.
And when you guys can get informed of your rights and start standing up for them and not quibbling over the crumbs that they let fall down to you, the better off you're going to be. We were given respect because we were created in our God's image. And we don't need to go begging government for anything because God's given it all to us. We need to take it back from the tyrant that took it from us, just like they did with the Magna Carta and the Glorious Revolution and the rest of it. The last time that anyone has truly stood up to a tyrannical government was in 1861, and you saw what happened. Lincoln didn't preserve anything, he created an empire. And until I encourage you to go, and I heard that you were a Confederate soldier, so you will hear the war, until you get that war right, to recognize that so many of your rights were destroyed in 1861, and they continued in 1913 with the 16th Amendment and the 17th Amendment and those things. And then study the anti-federalists, Hamilton and the Federalist Papers, that all gets talked about. The ones you really want to read are the anti-federalist papers. There's a great guy from Maryland, one of the best anti-federals, and his name, I'm getting it right, is Luther Martin. And he foresaw, he's called the drunken prophet, because he had a little alcohol problem. But he foresaw everything that's gone wrong with the United States Constitution before it was ever passed. And when you understand where they saw the problem was going to come in, then you can see how the fixes can come, because they talk about, well, this was changed and that was changed. And one of the most important protections against the federal tyrant that we had was that 17th Amendment, because those senators were beholden to the state legislature. And that meant they were beholden to you.
Discipline begins at home.
And then the other one at the state level that's even worse than the 17th Amendment is the Baker Carr Act. The law that changed so that each county doesn't have its own senators. That's why PG County and Montgomery County have way more senators than y'all do up here in Hartford County. And that's one that we all lean on Hogan to push. And that's what I lean on Hogan. He leaned on you to give him money and support and change Maryland and all that. Make him change it. Make him be distinct from Obama, but that's really what we need to do, and you need to know this. And the more active you get involved, you're only going to take back your country when you take back your county. And it sounds like you've got a great start. And you see how hard they're fighting you to remove your 5 Liberty people. All the ways that they're doing it. They can't do it to you if you know this.
Well, thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out. All right, everybody, well, thanks a lot. Remember, next month, 4th Tuesday, is our next meeting, so I hope you guys can all make it and bring a friend. Thanks a lot.